everyone, it's Thor with Creative Twilight. Today I wanted to do a marble painting tutorial. I had done one previously using Stormcast Eternals. The only problem was it was hard to get the camera in there to really show you exactly what I was doing. So I thought I would do take two, use something big and obvious like this flat surface. And of course this is applicable to anything, this is just for the sake of the tutorial. What I've done is I've base coated this with Pallid Witch Flesh. It's a very light color. It's got purple tones to it. I just find it's a little more interesting than just going with a pure white if you're doing a white marble. And then for the dark color for the veining, I'm using Eshin Gray. I don't like to use black because it just creates too much contrast. It's too stark. You totally can if that's the look you're going for. What I like to do is to mix in a little Pallid Witch Flesh with the Eshin Gray so that it kind of blends as I start this process. So what I'm going to do is take that mixture. It's probably maybe 3 parts Eshin Gray to 1 part Pallid Witch Flesh. And I'm going to use a large brush and very thin paint to start defining the pattern. What I will be doing is kind of starting off sloppy and big and then refining it as we go in. So just kind of take your brush, and the trick is to kind of wiggle this as you're creating the veining so that it's not just a straight line, and all those little wiggles add some nice detail to it. So you just do this for as many veins as you want, and you have to try to vary it up a little bit. And this is almost like if you were painting lightning. It's kind of got that same look to it, and really the same approach. So this is the hard part because it's so random and you're not precisely doing something to get something you like the look of. Honestly, sometimes it looks better than others, but I suppose that's the nature of marble anyway. So yeah, I'm just kind of working off some of these existing ones, just trying to create something that looks interesting. And again, I'm just wiggling this brush. So for the sake of this tutorial, I will call that good enough. So you can see I've got the basic kind of shape on here. It's pretty light, so as I come in and refine this, it will darken. So I'm going to take that same color, and this time I'll use a smaller brush and really just follow what I've already defined. Again, keeping it thin so it kind of blends with each layer, and really just follow this through. Now you don't have to do it precisely and follow it everywhere. You can kind of break it up so there's some stronger points, some weaker points. Marble doesn't hold, the veining doesn't hold the same strength all the way through it. So like on this one, I'll kind of skip here, come down. And I'm also still trying to keep that wiggling motion. And even if it goes outside of this a bit, that's fine. And now that I've got a smaller brush too, I could maybe add some smaller veining just to feel like this needs a little something. So I want to bring in some more just to kind of fill this space. And I suppose I'll bring some up from the bottom so it's not quite all the same. So something like that. And again, all I'm going to do for the kind of third layer, if you will, is just more of the same. Just using the same color, just come in and try to stay within everything that's previously been done to darken this up. I know the lights, it's kind of tricky shooting on white here, so I'm trying to not wash this out on you all. I'm going to be honest, and this isn't the prettiest marble I've painted, my pattern's a little blah. Like I said, it's definitely hit or miss. It's hard because if you do it intentionally, it looks intentional. So you need to try to create random, but not have it look random, which is honestly the hard part. But I'm just trying to give you an idea and show you the technique, not how to create the most amazing looking marble. That's going to be up to you and take a little time and practice to get right. I'm just adding in a few little spots just to, again, kind of keep it interesting and break this up a bit. So really that's it. I could keep going darker. So what I'll try now is going straight into the Eshin Gray, keeping it thin. Try to get some final little accents in here to really darken up some spots. Like I said, this really is a lot like painting lightning. If you were painting lightning, you would follow the same technique. I mean, this would be like a lightning bolt, and you would just create more arms coming off of it, I guess. It's very similar. Really, the only difference is the colors you use for the impression you're giving of what you're painting. So I'm going to call that good for the white marble. Now, an optional step if you want, and I'll do it for the sake of demonstration here, would be to blend this out a little bit. The veining on marble tends to be pretty distinct. It doesn't tend to blend in and kind of transition to the darker color a whole lot, but you certainly can. So what I can do is take my base coat, this Pallid Wych Flesh, just thin it out, and I can try to run along the lines here and maybe even go over some of them to kind of glaze it down if there's spots that were too dark you don't like. Just take a very thin layer of your base coat and kind of glaze over it to thin it out. I can just run this along the edges here to smooth out that first layer I did and blend that in some. I normally don't do this, but again, if you want something that's very smooth looking, this is totally an option. I'm not going to do it everywhere because that wouldn't be the most accurate or realistic version of veining, but again, it's totally up to you and whatever you think looks good. So that's it. I would call that pretty decent. Again, it's not my favorite pattern. You kind of have to play with it. I'm not going to pretend to be a professional, but again, I just wanted to show you the technique and the approach to how to do it, so that would be that. Now, if you wanted to do a black marble, let me move the camera here. It's just the same thing, you're just changing the color. So I'm starting on a black base coat. I could have totally done this with an Eshin Gray base coat, but it happened to be black already, so that's what I'll run with. So instead of using white, I'm going to use my Pallid Wych Flesh just, again, because I like the color. So instead of going pure Pallid Wych Flesh to start, I'm going to mix in a little Eshin Gray. So basically I'm going to reverse the ratio. So I'm going to go pretty much, say 3 parts Pallid Wych Flesh to the Eshin Gray. And then the process is the same as what I was doing before. I like to start out with a big brush to kind of get that rough pattern established, and then take a smaller brush later and refine it. Definitely check out reference photos for marble. I've done a lot of looking, and it's tricky, it's interesting. Marble, you really can't go wrong with it because no two pieces ever look the same. So for the sake of what I'm doing here, I'll call that good. So there's my first layer. And because I went on a little stronger than I wanted, I'll probably come in and do a bit of glazing after to smooth that out a bit. But I'll just keep going with what I've got. So I'll take that same mixture and just refine these lines with a smaller brush. Again, it's still pretty thin at this point. And as I said, what I'm trying to do is leave some of that previous layer visible so it creates a transition, so it blends into this stronger color. Now what I'll do is go to a pure palette witch flush, try to get the strongest areas defined. Again, I'm kind of skipping around. It's not going to be a continuous line. It just makes it look a little more visually interesting. So that looks pretty decent. Try to get an angle for you all to see this a little better. As you can see, it's a pretty stark contrast. If I were using pure white for the veining, it would be even more so. So what I want to do is I do want to blend these edges out a bit. So I'm just going to take some thin down black and just try to blend out some of these edges here. I'm kind of keeping this random. It's just the whole nature of all of this. You don't need to be precise and get it perfect. If you go over, like if I went like this and go over it, that's totally fine. As you can see, this is a pretty watered down layer of black because I want it to blend. I don't want to start contrast, so I will end up doing this a few times. I will say that black marble I find to be a little trickier because putting the light color on the dark color, the blending is a little harder. I could have started with a much lighter layer for that first go through with the veining, but my mix wasn't exactly where I wanted it to be, but that's fine. I can show you how you can deal with these situations. It seldomly goes perfect when you do this stuff. As you can see, it's drying in most spots, so I'm just going to come through and do some more of this to keep blending this out. And in some spots I'll go over it to glaze it down and to reduce the brightness of it as well. I don't need perfect blends here, I just want the transition a little less stark. I could do this as much as I want to get it exactly where I want. For this tutorial, I'll probably call this last layer good. Again, it's just to show you how to do it, the technique. It just takes practice. I haven't done this a lot, but I was pretty happy with the marbling I did when I did my Stormcast Eternals, which was like this, and I was pretty happy with it. So I figured I'd do a tutorial, and there's definitely people who can do this better than I can, but you know, if you're a beginner painter, you're just looking for a way to approach this, that's what I'm trying to offer you here. So that's still drying, but really that's all there is to this. It's just a matter of getting the shape right, trying to blend it out a little bit as you come up, and do not create too strong of a contrast. You can if that's the look you're going for. I tend to not do that. The other reason too that I like using the Pallid Witch Flesh here is if this were an actual model, I now have the ability to do some edge highlights on this and have those edge highlights show up. So I'll just grab some white right now for the sake of showing you and come in and just run some edge highlights on here. I don't know that the camera's really going to pick this up, since Pallid Witch Flesh is very close to white. But I think you can kind of pick it up a bit there. So that's really all there is to it. Hopefully this was a little easier to follow than my previous one. I'll definitely keep that one linked because, like I said, every time you do this, it's going to come out differently. It's just the nature of how this works. So I hope you enjoyed that. Hopefully you found it useful. If you did like it, please go ahead and give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed, please go ahead and do so, and I'll catch you all later.